guys, happy Friday. Yes, finally Friday, we made it. Give yourself a high five. Better yet, give me a high five. Welcome to the Fox 5 Live Zone. I'm your host, Guy Lambert. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, guys, we got a busy day ahead. It's a new day, a new hour, and during this hour, you know what's happening? The D.C. Council voting yay or nay with regard to RFK. Yes, the commanders coming back to the nation's capital. Will they or won't they? We're going to find out, hopefully, during this hour. We'll take you live to the council meeting. Also, we're talking Gen Z and Gen X, slang words in this case. Who has the better slang words? Stick around for that one. Annie Mae will join us to break it all down. All that and more coming up on the show, but, well, quite honestly, the real star right now happens to be the weather. Picture perfect in my opinion, but don't let me tell it. Caesar now joining us right here on the Live Zone. Happy Friday, my friend.
Happy Friday, Guy. I'm hoping everyone is enjoying this beautiful day. I know it might not be like the best because we don't have the sunshine out there, but you know what? Hey, that's overrated. Let's save that for the weekend. You know what? Friday, we can have a little bit of some gloom over top of us as long as it brings in that basically nature's AC, right?
I love it.
It's beautiful out there. We continue to see that cooler and cloudier Friday setup, right? And we could even still have a few showers still popping through the area just because that cold front's continuing to really dry out the rest of that our atmosphere. So that's going to then lead to tons of sunshine going into this weekend, and then the cooler temperatures continue into next week. So having that nice little fall-like or at least late summer-like conditions really hanging with us as we head in towards the first part, at least the first full week of August. Looking here at the forecast for today, again, 76 degrees is where we're topping out, and temperatures continuing to hang very nicely in those 60s and 70s for us throughout a lot of our area, but it comes with a little caveat of, again, some clouds, the occasional rain shower, and some winds out of the north at about 10 to 15 miles an hour, with wind gusts getting up to about 22. So it does feel a little bit more brisk out there, but it's less humid. So because of that, the lack of humidity, or at least what is going to continue to be dropping dew points, well, we'll end up seeing better conditions throughout the rest of the day. So you'll notice, again, Futurecast showing a few rain showers still popping up, especially towards the evening. Then it dries on out and sets us up to see a beautiful Saturday where not much really goes on. And looking at the temperatures going in towards the overnight hours, we start off with a nice, very comfortable mid-60s, even some upper 50s a little further to the northwest. So again, you can step outside and not start to sweat like we have been all of this week. Then looking at tomorrow, no chance of rain, and temperatures still hanging around those upper 70s, low 80s is what we're expecting, and most of the time we are going to stay pretty cloud-free. So that is going to set us up for a very comfortable day where temperatures, again, are getting to those upper 70s, low 80s, and sunshine out there. So if you have plans, tomorrow is the pick of the weekend, but Sunday also is not looking bad as we continue to see temperatures hanging mostly in those low 80s for us, and then even mid 80s as we start off the new work week. But we are still going to deal with less humidity. It's been a while since it has not been downright tropical and soupy outside, so we're going to take advantage of that because as we look at the humidity tracker, right, you'll notice, of course, it continues to drop, and by the time we get in towards Saturday, Sunday, it stays pretty comfortable. But going into the new work week, by the time we get towards around Wednesday, Thursday, that's where we start to see things picking back up, producing a little bit more cloud cover and the possibility for a few rain showers again. So that is going to be the big thing, enjoying all of the outdoor activities we can this weekend because, again, you don't really see low 80s, low humidity in the month of August here in the DMV. It is usually a rare sight. You usually have this a little closer to September, but again, we'll take it anytime we can get it, especially after this very hot and humid week that we had. And you'll notice that it, again, blends into parts of Monday, right? Nicer conditions, less humidity, also more sunshine. Temperatures in the mid-80s. Tuesday, we start to see clouds return slowly but surely. Humidity increases slowly as well by the time we get to Thursday, but temperatures still stay moderate around those mid-80s. But we are still eyeing some rain showers by the time we get to Thursday. So again, after everything that's happened, of course, yesterday, earlier this week with all that humidity, I'm going to take this weekend and soak it all in for as much as I can.
If only I could bottle it. Oh my gosh, I'd be a billionaire.
Right? Oh my goodness, imagine that.
Picture
Just
perfect.
picture perfect weather. Here you go, can of it.
Good stuff. Caesar with all things weather joining us right here on the Live Zone. Hey guys, if you haven't already done so yet, make sure you download the Fox Local app. That way you can take this beautiful forecast with you any and everywhere you go. All right, guys, it's now 5 minutes past the top of the hour, and all eyes are on the nation's capital. Hey, guys, Typically,
happy
when
Friday,
one
yes.
says that, well, in this case, we're thinking 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. That happens to be the White House. Not the case this very moment. 1350 Pennsylvania Avenue. That happens to be the John Wilson Building, where any minute the D.C. City Council will convene and discuss and vote yay or nay with regard to bringing the commanders back to RFK. Some are still concerned about the billion-dollar investment and what it could mean for the surrounding area. Joining us now to discuss this and so much more, Janae Addison. And Janae, I got to tell you, today's the day that a lot of folks have been waiting for.
Yeah, a lot of eyes are on this. This week's hearing drew in hundreds of residents who came to testify. We also heard from lawmakers who remain divided on the issue, with some raising concern about the possible negative impacts this multi-million-dollar deal could have. I think we have the sound. Let's take a listen.
I want to bring the team home, but I will not do that at the expense of the people who already live here.
We would be fools not to scrutinize it and work toward a deal that's better and more fair to DC taxpayers.
Now, earlier this morning, Fox 5 did speak to DC Mayor Muriel Bowser, who is in favor of the deal. Take a look.
It's vote day. The council has an amazing deal before them that's going to help us transform 180 acres, the shortest, fastest way, welcome our team home, 10,000 more residents, better parks, a sportsplex. So it's time to get the deal done.
So to some of the council members and residents who are a little apprehensive about various parts of the deal, have you heard any concerns that you found to be legitimate that you want to speak to?
Well, you know, I addressed them in my testimony. I got to testify on our project just a couple of days ago. We heard things around parking. We addressed them. We heard things around the environment. We addressed them. These council members especially said they wanted to see more general fund revenues. We addressed that. And we addressed how the community is going to be involved through their community benefits agreement. So I think that we have listened. We heard from our community. We made changes. The team has been a great partner in those conversations, and now it's time to vote.
I understand that September will be another vote on this. What happens if the vote does not go your way and some of these fans' way today?
Well, it has to, because I think the team will make other decisions if it doesn't. You know, I have been involved in a year-long conversation with the team, coming up with a great plan, literally saying, let's lock arms, come together with a great deal. In that process, I secured the land from the federal government. I allowed the additional uses beyond a stadium in that legislation. And I negotiated an exclusive period of negotiation with the team. So what that means is that they need to get to a yes, or they need to make other decisions about building a stadium.
And there could be more modifications made even after today if the deal goes through.
Well, this needs to be vote day.
Yeah.
This needs to be vote day so that we and the team have assurances that we can start planning, that we can hire people to finish the plans, and that we can get a shovel in the ground. Frequently, people just focus on 2030 as opening day, but really, as soon as this is approved, we're going to start hiring small businesses. DC residents are going to start going to work. And in next year, we'll put a shovel in the ground. And that will also get us sooner to our indoor sportsplex, where our young people now have to go all over the region for indoor track, for gymnastics, for cheerleading. Now we can do that competition level sport right in Washington, D.C.
Very interesting. Yet again, the mayor, in so many words, saying there is no room for no. Yes is the only vote that she accepts. And so as we wait yet again for the council to convene, the question is, what's going to happen now? At least, what are we speculating to happen now, Janae?
Yeah, so the DC Council is expected to vote in mere minutes. And as we mentioned earlier, this is only one of two votes. Another vote is expected to happen in September, and 8 votes are needed in order for this to pass.
Yeah, that rhetoric somewhat different with regard to, as we just heard a minute ago from Councilmember Robert White. He's stating that, well, he believes the bill will not pass in its current form. To put it plain and simple, folks, I mean, he's asking for a number of things. Not only him, but several other council members as well. It doesn't get any more nerve-wracking, I would add, if you happen to be a fan of the Commanders with regard to bringing them back to Washington, D.C. So it's the magic number. What's the magic number of today? In this case, it happens to be 8. Yes, 8 votes with regard to yay, yes, need to happen out of the 12 members on the council in order for this to move forward. Yet again, we're going to take you to the John Wilson building any minute now once the council convenes. I should also make mention that this will likely be a very lengthy meeting as well. The reason why, there will be several amendments, in essence, that will probably be presented in order for the council members to vote yes. Just minutes ago, we got word that, well, you'll see it right there on your TV screen, Council Member Zach Parker actually giving us an update on the RFK labor agreement. Apparently, as you can read it for yourself, well, we are proud to announce that the contract agreement between the Commanders and union partners has been signed. This is a victory for the workers who keep our city running and who deserve fairness, dignity, and a voice on the job. Yet again, that coming from Councilmember Zach Parker, who, to my understanding, was probably going to vote no prior to having this agreement put into place. With regard to what some of the other council members are looking for, we can tell you paid parking, a focus on the surrounding environment, and the general fund revenue, which, yet again, very interesting. According to Mayor Bowser, all of these issues, if you will, have already been addressed. Earlier this week, as you stated, we heard a number of hearings got underway. The first one taking some 12 hours in length. You talk about a marathon hearing. Over 500 people signed up to speak during that hearing. Day 2, yet again, very vital, very crucial. 2 key players speaking during that time. The president of the Washington Commanders stating that now is the time in order for this to happen, and yet again, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, who, as we now know, says all of this needs to come to fruition, and it needs to start right now. We're going to keep a close eye on the council members and the council meeting with regard to when it will convene. In the meantime, one of the other big stories happening right here in the nation's capital. Yet again, day 3 of the NTSB DC mid-air collision. Let's take you now live as that hearing is underway.
47's currently working on it with minimum performance standards projected to be completed next year. And so there was a prototype version of XR that we added to the U860. And then lastly, we changed the quantization, the altitude quantization that we're using to feed the collision avoidance from the 25-foot increments versus 100-foot increments. So in total, there were 15 total test configurations, and we did 100 iterations on each of those test configurations. And again, what we wanted to do, and what I'm going to show later, are the mean, or sort of the average results from timing as well as missed distance, vertically and horizontally.
If you could bring up Exhibit 2 Aero Golf, page 36. And in the interest of time, Mr. Suchi, what I'd like is, let's start with, or maybe run through number 6 on.
Okay. Sure. Well, so in general, what we found is that both TCAS and XA, as designed with their current inhibits, would have only provided a traffic alert prior to the collision, but neither would have provided a resolution advisory. In order to get that resolution advisory, you would have to lower the inhibits to the encounters. And as alluded to previously, someone mentioned, I don't remember who, but the early development of TCAS, the inhibits for resolution advisories were at 500 feet. And I think we've had that discussion as to why they ended up being raised to 1,000 feet. When we looked specifically at the quantization bearing list, it didn't really have any effect on timing. And I think I'll walk through those results. Then lastly, the use of the prototype of XR on the helicopter did significantly reduce the collision risk without actually having to change existing design of TCAS or ACAS XA. Now, so to go through the results using we're going to focus on the data from the NTSB, the truth data. When we look at runs 6 and 7, it's using TCAS as is with the inhibits where they are. We varied the quantization from 100 to 25 feet. And when we look across the results, the quantization of the altitude had no effect on the average TA timing. So it basically concluded or confirmed that, approximately 20 seconds or so prior to CPA that you would have gotten a TA, though. Run 8, where we assessed the bottom antenna, bearingless only on the input. It didn't have any effect on the timing of the TA. It would have been an effect on the display to the pilot. I think that was discussed already, where if you had bearing, you would have seen the yellow circle. Without bearing, you would have got traffic alert symbol or wording text on the bottom of the display center without an indication of where the threat aircraft would be. All right, so when we'll get into modifying and lowering the RA thresholds for current TCAS from 900 feet to 400 feet. What we see is the timing on the for the TA, and this is a simulation actually, in order to lower the thresholds for TCAS, we weren't able to go in and physically change the rules and heuristics of the logic. We actually raised the altitude flown from the surveillance data we were given, and so it's actually being assessed in a sensitivity level 3 versus a sensitivity level 2. So you see a little variation in the timing, but the point here is more on the RA timing, and you would have gotten an RA about 14 seconds prior to closest point of approach, with about anywhere from 300 to 327 feet in vertical mist distance. And so you see a slight variation in quantization being fed to the system as to the ultimate mean distance you get with vertical separation. So a little better actual separation with 100-foot quantization than with the 25-foot. Now, getting into the XA runs 11 and 12, it's, again, the inhibits are at the same level as current TCAS design. However, you do get a earlier average traffic alert time, so about 27 to 28 seconds prior to closest point of approach, you would get a TA, where you were seeing previously the 20 seconds. So you get about a 7-second additional lead time on the traffic alert. But however, it doesn't assist because it's, the event was lower than the resolution advisory threshold or inhibit boundaries. When you modify the ACAS-X logic, you do, again, see similar performance like you did with doing the same thing for TCAS. Again, a little earlier mean time for the traffic alert. We're at 28 seconds, and you get a RA about 17 seconds prior to closest approach with vertical separation. And again, the quantization adds a little variation in the vertical mist distance, but you achieve about 400 to 420 feet vertical mist distance with modified XA. And then lastly, we used TCAS with 100-foot quantization and added the XR functionality on the UH-60. You get, again, similar for the CRJ TA around 20 seconds, and you get for the UH-60, the simulation results show a TA around 73 seconds. You get no RA, again, with the TCAS, CRJ. You get an RA about 28 seconds prior to closest point of approach, and your vertical and horizontal, well, your horizontal miss distance is about 2,200 feet, and your vertical miss distance is about 110 feet.
Thank you. I did want to point out that all these simulations assume 100% compliance with the resolution advisory, which in today's world, it doesn't happen. Hopefully in the future world with the reduced nuisance alerts, we'll get much higher compliance. And one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit more is the whole premise of ACAS and why ACAS was developed as a follow-on to TCAS. I'm going to go to Dr. Olson for this. What is the actual difference, or what's improving in ACAS versus TCAS?
So first, I would like to just say, from a history standpoint, at Lincoln Laboratory, we came up with an initial concept for improving collision avoidance using machine learning. And the FAA, through the TCAS program office with Mr. Suki, funded that activity very early on to improve collision avoidance, to adapt it for the future. There was a study within RTCA, the standards body, to look at the future of collision avoidance. There were complaints from operators about the excessive nuisance alert rate, and so RTCA Special Committee 147, that does the collision avoidance work, determined whether or not TCAS was adaptable for the future or whether a new approach was needed. The conclusion was a new approach was needed that would account for platforms, the lower climb and descent performance, improve surveillance, and closer density operations. So ACAS X as a concept was developed to be modular, whereas TCAS, that interrogation and reply that was discussed several times, is tightly coupled to the logic. We wanted to ingest new surveillance sources for crewed aircraft. We're looking at ADSB, the Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, but decoupling that would also allow for uncrewed aircraft to use perhaps a primary radar or a ground-based radar or electro-optical sources, whatever was appropriate to drive the alerting and the guidance logic. So the approach in general is to take that surveillance and to account for surveillance uncertainty. So Dr. Kunze already discussed there is greater uncertainty with the interrogation reply than with ADSB, and these other surveillance sources also have uncertainty. But there's also maneuver uncertainty. So the other aircraft may suddenly maneuver in a direction that you don't encounter, you don't expect. So for example, in an encounter with a non-TCAS or ACAS equipped aircraft, they may, via detect and avoid, see the aircraft maneuver, but in the same direction. So we need to account for that maneuver uncertainty. So using machine learning techniques and an extensive amount of data, radar data, and also through the TCAS program office, who collects information on TCAS resolution advisories, the radar tracks for the own ship and the intruder, as well as the types and the nature of the RAs. We use that through machine learning techniques to tune a logic with specific objectives, to reduce nuisance alerts. So we focused extensively on the 500-foot separation between instrument flight rules and visual flight rules on parallel approaches, and also iterated that with the community through RTCA. We conducted 2 flight tests in conjunction with the Federal Aviation Administration at the William J. Hughes Technical Center. And we also had an operational evaluation of the final product by putting it on 10 aircraft and flying around the U.S. national airspace. So tuning, observing the output in modeling and simulation. So we simulated hundreds of billions of encounters, safety critical encounters, as well as using radar data from across the entire U.S. national airspace provided by the MITRE Corporation to understand the alerting at specific airports, specific altitude bands, as well as the safety across a wide number of encounters. And the resulting logic through that machine learning is instantiated on a lookup table that goes on the aircraft, the same form, fit, function of a TCAS unit. And the initial version was ACAS XA. It also provided provisions for what we call ACAS XO, or operation-specific alerting, using that ADSBN technology that Captain Stone talked about to designate an aircraft, perhaps on a parallel runway, to provide different types of alerts, or no alerting at all in the case of visual separation operations. And we've developed since then through RTCA with funding from Mr. Suki and the Federal Aviation Administration, and participation by Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab, who's been a strong partner in this development. Versions for larger UAS called ACAS-XU, version for smaller UAS or drones, if you will, ACAS-SXU and ACAS-XR, which is relevant to this discussion. For rotorcraft, both crewed rotorcraft as well as more autonomous or uncrewed rotorcraft, maybe eVTOLs, advanced air mobility, urban air mobility of the future.
Can I get you to, the one that you left out, I think, is ACAS-XO. And I'm keenly interested in ACAS-XO because the idea of it is to suppress alerts in those situations where you have close to space parallel runways, which is, I think, a large number of the nuisance alerts that we get today are in those kind of situations. And how would you describe the evolution of ACAS-XO and where does it need to go?
So the flexibility of the ACAS-X approach and be able to tune differently for different types of operations. Earlier on in the development of ACAS-X, the community identified a number of areas of concern, and closely spaced parallel approaches was one of those areas. But I would point out this technique of providing differential alert for any special operation is adaptable for the future. So, for example, if there were rotorcraft operations that were very different, we can use that same technique in designating aircraft, specific aircraft, to treat them differently. For ACAS-XO, the initial implementation was oriented towards parallel runways with two applications. One was for what we call the CSPO, closely spaced parallel operations mode, for runway separations down to 3,000 feet, which would be in instrument meteorological conditions that reduce the volume protected. You can think of it that way. That's not really the underlying technical approach, but you can think of it conceptually, reducing the alerting volume to minimize nuisance alerts on parallel runway monitoring PRM approaches that are currently being conducted today. The other area was the realization that most of the parallel approach operations are conducted in visual conditions, and that pilots could use the ADS-B-in functionality to designate another aircraft and receive no alerts at all on that aircraft, receiving full protection against every other aircraft. So if there was a helicopter or a GA aircraft or an aircraft on a different runway that was blundering through, you would still get the full protection against that aircraft. So that was the initial application, but it could be expanded to other applications if they were defined by the community with the safety objectives and the alerting objectives.
And last question on ACAS is, what is the state of ACAS standards and implementation?
I can answer part of that, although I think that's really maybe more appropriate for Mr. Haskins, since that implementation is really an FAA matter. Mr. Haskins, I can address that, or you could.
No, I can state. So we have a technical standard order, which is the document we use to certify. We have that published for ACAS XA. That was published back in 2020. To date, we have not certified any equipment under that technical standard order. As far as ACAS XR goes, which I guess we're going to get into, but it's something we're keenly interested in, we're going to treat that as a very high priority, and we're going to publish that technical standard order as soon as we can after the RTCA body finishes the standards development. We think we can do that within 3 to 4 months.
And with that, I'm actually going to turn it back over to Mr. Flynn to talk about ACAS XR.
Thank you. Dr. Olson, so ACAS-X, is it only dependent on ADS-B?
So it depends which variant you're talking about. But for ACAS-XA and for ACAS-XR, the intention is to use both the ADS-B information as well as the standard TCAS style interrogation and reply. And the way the system works is it uses that ADS-B information as long as it is validated. So as long as it matches the bearing and range of the TCAS interrogation reply. And that's to mitigate against inaccurate or spoofed ADS-B information.
Okay. So if ADS-B is inoperative on an airplane, the accuracy of ACAS will be degraded?
Mr. Suki, you had a No, okay. The accuracy, so we tune the logic to be just as safe, whether it's using ADSB information or whether it is only using, in quotes, the interrogation reply information. The alert rate is slightly higher if there is no ADSB information, but it's very important.
All right, guys, welcome to the Fox 5 Live Zone. If you're just joining us, it is now 12:30. We are following two developing stories. If you have been watching us, you've been hearing testimony, day 3 of the NTSB hearings that are currently underway. Earlier this week, on Wednesday, the families of the loved ones that lost their lives, well, they sat in the audience of the hearing, some of whom wore pictures of their loved ones around their necks or on buttons. They broke down in tears as officials played the video with newly released surveillance footage of the incident. We are going to continue to monitor that throughout the afternoon. On the right-hand side of your screen, you see the blue box right there? Yeah, any minute now we expect video to start rolling. That video will be live. Within it, city council members, DC city council members at that. At issue, will they vote yay or nay for the commanders to return to RFK? It is apparent that, or we are assuming as of right now, some last-minute deals are probably being made, and that's why it is somewhat delayed. It was due to get underway beginning at 12 noon. Earlier today, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser speaking out yet again, saying that today is D-Day. The vote needs to be yes. We can also tell you that a number of council members have, well, already stated that they will vote no as the bill currently stands in its form. That changed for Councilmember Zach Parker, likely, as he posted to X earlier today, an update on the RFK labor agreement. As a result, he may very well vote in favor of the current plan. We're going to continue to wait out. Any minute now, yet again, expect the City Council to convene and vote whether in favor or against the actual bill as it currently stands. In the meantime, we'll take you back to the NTSB hearing, yet again surrounding the D.C. mid-air collision.
Oscar, I believe, is the letter on it. And go to slide 5, page 5. So these 3 pictures. The left one is just a conceptual installation. The unit, of course, needs to be there, and as Mr. Haskin pointed out earlier, transponder and the ACAS computer are part of the system. We already have prototypes of the ACAS XR that we are testing currently. That prototype does include 2 separate units. We are implementing the software of the ACAS so that it will work on a newer hardware platform that we're developing for the Army for their MODES IFF transponder obsolescence replacement. The installation also includes a display, and it is very likely that we'll be able to use the same display, but it would require an FMS update to receive the data from the ACAS and provide that information to the display. If you look to the center picture, this is what our ACAS XR system will look like. Transponder, ACAS X, all in one, ADSB in, ADSB out, everything's there. One of the important parts of this is that it will operate with 2 omnidirectional antennas. Traditional TCAS systems required at least 1 directional antenna. On a helicopter, it is sometimes, well, I would say almost always difficult and sometimes problematic to find a location to mount the antenna. And even if you do get a directional antenna mounted, there's interfering components that can compromise the integrity of the bearing measurements that you would get with that antenna. So this system, the ACAS XR, is being designed in the industry standards committees to operate with omnidirectional antennas only, which facilitates, simplifies the installation. On the right side picture, this is just it's our flight test evaluation kit, just to kind of exemplify how simple, I guess you could say, the system can work. It's self-enclosed, battery operated. We can take this onto an aircraft or operate it on a bench, connect it to a GPS puck for own aircraft information. Works with an iPad display, which of course is for demonstration purposes only. The antennas can connect, and for our, sometimes with the flight test, we'll just have a suction cup antenna. We don't operate it as part of the aircraft system, but just to demonstrate it. Self-contained battery operated, and you can evaluate the system very simply. If you go to the next page, for the Army project that we're working on right now to replace the obsolete Modus IFF transponders, we're developing what we call our micro common transponder. And this is a plug-in replacement for the transponder that is already there. Meaning it's form, fit, function. You take one out and put the new unit in. So we've mounted our low size, weight, power unit inside of this container so that it will fit directly in the aircraft the way the other one does. With that, our design of our product, as I've indicated, is designed such that ACAS XR upgrade to that unit is software only. Now, if you go to the next slide, this just shows a installation overview of the system. And in blue, you see the blue, solid blue box there that says the update needed for ACAS X. And then if you look down, anything that's light blue in that basic installation diagram are areas that would need to change to go from the transponder version to the version with the ACAS XR. And that includes, of course, the upgrade for the XR software itself. It includes the oral data, which there's already an audio bus, so it's assuming that we can just put the additional oral on the bus and use the existing interface on the aircraft. It also includes the display interface, the intruder data, the resolution advisory data would come out on an existing bus going to the FMS, and then of course it would require an update to the FMS to be able to process that additional data and display it. So while not trivial, it is very straightforward and a doable implementation.
If I might add, the reason I asked you to repeat the question is because you said a challenge. I see it more as an opportunity. I'm a PM, so I have to be optimistic, but I'm like, okay, it's an opportunity from our perspective.
Okay. I guess you did answer all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, we're getting close to the end, which is good. I do have a question for Mr. Suki, and that's, can you tell us what your plans are for future ACAS standards development? Where are we at and where are we going?
Yes, as mentioned previously, we're working to complete the standards for ACAS XR within RTCA Special Committee 147 by late spring of next year, in order for them to be published by the Program Management Committee of RTCA, become a published standard from which then the regulator will move forward with their technical standard order. And currently right now, at the conclusion of that, there are no more plans. We are internally strategizing and potentially trying to seek resources to support a limited implementation program or something along those lines for XR, but that has not been formalized.
Any plans for a limited implementation program with ACAS XA?
We had completed an op-eval already, as Dr. Olson mentioned, where we equipped 10 aircraft with 2 different vendor equipment and flew it for over a year across the NAS.
Thank you. And one last question for Colonel Flanagan. Is the Army, do you have any plans for beyond what you're doing? I mean, you're looking at what the ACAS XR standards are, and it seems as though you've already picked a transponder that is potentially upgradable. Is there any other future plans in the Army as far as collision avoidance systems that would allow you the airspace access that's in your job title?
So I think where you might be going with this is our motivation isn't just civil airspace. So being the Army, we have a imperative to operate in tactical airspace, which our previous mission was low altitude, congested, and it's a recurring challenge to safely operate in those environments. So we have a tactical imperative in addition to a civil imperative to have this technology on board. Is that what you're going after?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. For the FAA, can you require military aircraft to be equipped with collision avoidance technologies?
So, for instance, the transponder and the ADSB requirements are done by airspace. So, anybody that's flying within the airspace where those are required, have to equip with those technologies. So we could require collision avoidance in a similar fashion, and then the military would be expected to comply in that airspace. Today, the collision avoidance requirements are by the parts they're operating under, and the military do not operate under those parts. Therefore, they currently have no collision avoidance requirements from the FAA.
If I could just add, I think I was in the Air Force at the time the original TCAS requirements came in, which was the result of a mid-air collision as well as some other incidents, and that was a DoD directive to equip troop and passenger carrying aircraft in certain classes and categories with TCAS. So that was in the late 90s.
And with, and this question is for the Army, for collision avoidance technologies that will use ADSB, probably for Colonel Flanagan, how would this affect Army policy in use of ADSB in civil airspace?
So ADSB, not just the Army, but DoD has concerns that I'm pretty sure most people are aware of, the fact that it's inherently open source. It has some spoofing vulnerabilities which make it non-conducive for those sensitive missions, which not just the Army, but all of DoD has to operate on. So in civil airspace, when there's traffic information systems broadcast, TSB network, the Army can comply with mode 3 Alpha Charlie emissions and feed into that fused picture, so anybody who has a tie-in for the TSB network has the awareness. On non-sensitive missions, there's obviously not an issue with complying. I would offer a little bit more expansive. We are mindful of the additional details which are available, and another aspect of the micro common transponder that Mr. Rowland mentioned is the capability to do mode 5 level 2 Bravo, which is essentially ADSB information but using mode 5 level encryption, and that enables us to operate again in the tactical environment that we're focused on as a military.
Mr. Shin, could you just suspend for a second? I know that we have one witness. Don't leave yet. I have one question for you. You said one. I just have one question for you, Mr. Kasner, and if anyone else has a quick question for him, I know he has to leave, but he's also offered to answer questions in writing if need be afterwards. You had said earlier that TAs or traffic alerts, which we heard traffic, is still see and avoid. Can you just say why that is for people in the audience?
Well, in the case of an RO alert, your attention is simply directed out the window as before, except in this case you enjoy a bit of information about where to restrict your search. But even if you're using a display, you're searching on the display. We're not going to take the human out of the loop here.
Right, you're still searching. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks, I just wanted to make sure people were aware of that. Thank you for, did you want to add?
Add to that for again, for aviation and helicopters at those low altitudes, as Mr. Invectin has said, we cannot afford to be focused inside of the helicopter really at all. Actually, one of the exhibits showed that, pilots only look inside every, I think, 9.2 seconds, something to that realm. So it's not reasonable to have a pilot look for a traffic advisory, process that, orient, figure out where they are, then do something about it. That we're talking over 10 seconds, which is not compatible for us, which is why we're fixated on the resolution advisory capability of ACAS XR.
Thank you very much for adding that, and thank you for participating on the panel, and have a good flight. No. Back to you, Mr. Shin.
Thank you. Dr. Kunze, ATAS, that's ADSB Traffic Advisory System, if I got that acronym correct, uses ADSB. Is it using ADSB pressure or GPS altitude?
It can use both, but it defaults to pressure altitude when available.
And as we talked about during panel 1 with the pressure altitude for the Black Hawk potentially having an offset from its true altitude, can you give us your assessment on how this would impact the effectivity of ATAS?
Yeah, it actually generalizes to ACAS as well. One of the key considerations when designing these types of systems is how the system responds in the presence of known or unknown errors. ADSB is unique in the sense that it actually tells you the quality of the data that you have, so you get an estimate of the error and therefore the trustworthiness of the data that you're receiving. But you don't get that with some of the other sensor systems that we use today. So when you design a system, a majority of the work is actually spent on designing robustness into the system for errors in position, velocity, altitude, or similar. Dropouts actually is a very common, especially at low altitudes. You sometimes lose a track, or things like latency if you have a secondary system that rebroadcasts information. So the work that we have been doing in the special committees for ACAS X, as well as the work that we had to do for ATAS back in the day, a large amount. We simulate millions of mid-air collisions over and over, and we inject over and over, like all kinds of different errors, combinations of errors. And then it comes down to tuning the system to have robustness to the presence of errors while maintaining the safety and operational suitability or nuisance alert characteristics. So it really is a game of tuning it just right with the knobs to satisfy all the design objectives that you might have. You could optimize for perfect data, and you could get very, very, very good alerting, but as soon as you move off of that perfect data and you have the presence of an error, the system would be too brittle and it would break and you would get nuisance alerts again, or you would miss alerts altogether. And so the design to be robust to the presence of errors is a fundamental consideration when you build these kinds of systems.
Mr. Suki, can you expand on why pressure altitude is the default used for TCAS and also for ACAS?
Yeah, because of just the, I guess the standardization of pressure altitude in aviation, and its ability to be used without having to be compensated, at all altitudes, and so it'll be the same for each aircraft, or I should say uncorrected. So just because of its availability, it's out there. It's used internationally, so it's sort of standardized in that respect, and that's why it's leveraged.
Thank you. And one last question. This probably will also be for Mr. Suki. We talked during panel 1 about how with older technologies like the barometric altimeters that use Android wafers are very mechanical, and so they have multiple errors that can stack up in that design compared to newer technologies like air data computers that have higher accuracy. How do collision avoidance technologies compensate for the varying types of pressure altitude accuracies or inaccuracies that you may have in the national airspace system?
So I would go back to what Dr. Kunze was talking about, is building the robustness in the collision avoidance capability. We're not looking so much as accounting for error. It's what we get from the transponder and the quantization of that information to the transponder, and then we treat that along with all these other state uncertainties and make our determination of needing to alert or not based off of that. So it's more what we're fed, and we're dealing with what we're fed with our robustness checks and tests associated in the alerting logic, and we go with that. So we're not down at the finer level of all the different errors that tally up.
Sorry, I know I said one last, but this will be my last one. So in something like a Class Bravo airspace, holistically, would it be better to have more accurate pressure altitude data being fed to the transponder when with collision avoidance technologies?
Yeah, better data is always, better. But again, we're having to build for a lot of robustness with other systems that are in the NAS or in the world aviation system, and we have to be able to account for all of them, and we have to ensure that we are interoperable with all of that. So as those enhancements move forward and they're extrapolated to more users, you can lean on them in a more heavy fashion. But as of right now, it's really hard to remove systems from the airspace, and we still have to be accountable for them.
If I may add something to what Neil just said with respect to the errors, one of the things to keep in mind is that the data coming into the system is very important when it comes to determining the quality of the alerting. Better data is better. The flip side to that is the dynamic uncertainty of the behavior of the aircraft is just as important. We may have very good data about an aircraft, but we can't predict the future perfectly. And so you may have very good data that tells you don't have a problem, but then that aircraft maneuvers and you do have a problem. So from an uncertainty perspective, yes, state uncertainty, position, altitude, velocity matters and it needs to be minimized. But that doesn't get rid of the uncertainty problem as a whole, because you have dynamic uncertainty as to what the aircraft is going to do, especially in aircraft that are not in communication with air traffic control or maybe, a VFR aircraft that's not under IFR operations. So that those two buckets are actually very important and need to be considered individually.
Okay, we're going to have Dr. Bramble for a couple of follow-ups.
Yes, Mr. Suchi, bringing the focus back.
All right, you've been listening to the NTSB hearing on the DC mid-air collision. As promised, as expected, and apparently now happening, we'll now take you to the Wilson Building, 1350 Pennsylvania Avenue, as the City Council will now vote yay or nay with regard to bringing the commanders back to RFK. Let's take a look in.
It is 12:52 p.m., and I'm calling to order this additional meeting of the committee. For the record, I'd like to note that we have a quorum, which consists of myself, at-large Councilmember Anita Bonds, Ward 6 Councilmember Charles Allen, Ward 7 Councilmember Wendell Felder, and Chairman, no, I guess not, Disappearing Act. Today, the committee will consider and vote on Bill 26-288, the Robert F. Kennedy Campus Redevelopment Act of 2025. I introduced Bill 26-288 along with Chairman Mendelson on June 20th, 2025. The bill was sequentially referred to the Committee on Business and Economic Development and the Committee of the Whole on July 1st, 2025. The committees held 2 public hearings on the bill, the first for public witnesses on June 29th of this year, and the second one for government witnesses and representatives from the Washington Commanders on July 30th, 2025. In late April of this year, the mayor unveiled a term sheet outlining the deal with the Washington Commanders that will serve as a catalyst for redeveloping the RFK Stadium campus. However, the term sheet as presented fell a little short of what I thought DC residents and DC-based small businesses deserve. Since then, I've worked along with my colleagues on this committee and across the council, the chairman, to negotiate a better deal for the District of Columbia, one that delivers additional revenue, a robust community benefits agreement, more jobs and stronger labor protections for DC workers, a stronger requirements for significantly more small business contract participation. Improving this deal was not done in a vacuum. The feedback was heard directly from residents across the District of Columbia via marathon hearings, town halls, emails, social media. The voices of thousands of residents, including our youth and small business owners, helped shape the bill that's in front of us today. I've said this from the very beginning. This deal is about more than simply building a football stadium. This is about supporting people and building community. It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity that will not only bring our beloved sports franchise back to the nation's capital, but it will also transform a long-dormant waterfront to a thriving mixed-use community that drives economic opportunity for the more than 700,000 District of Columbia residents, especially those residing in Ward 7, Ward 8, and the adjacent communities of Ward 5 and Ward 6. The proposed 65,000-seat Dune Stadium is intended to be a year-round destination, hosting everything from Super Bowls to Beyonce concerts, from the NCAA Final Fours to FIFA World Cups, to community festivals that showcase our city's unique local talent and culture. We negotiated an additional $779 million investment to the district through tax revenue from non-stadium event day parking, merchandise, food and beverage sales, a community benefits agreement, and financial savings that were not even initially contemplated in the original iteration of this deal. Equally important to the revenue generation that will benefit DC taxpayers, the stadium development will yield up to 6,000 new residential units, 1,800 of which will be affordable. The robust and binding $50 million community benefits agreement will net a youth sports academy that exposes DC youth to the sports industry in a way that no city has ever done before. Support the attraction and construction of long-awaited grocery store in Ward 7, and workforce development and jobs, among other things. The newly negotiated deal will also put district businesses and workers first. The commanders have committed to a minimum of 40% certified business enterprise spend requirement with a goal of 50%. The project labor agreement for the stadium would include a $15 million carve-out to benefit of CBEs to ensure our local and small businesses are part of the fabric of this deal. Critically important to me, as a former dues-paying member of the Postal Carriers Union, the commanders have entered into project labor agreements and labor peace agreements with our local unions to provide district residents to access to stable, good-paying jobs. Finally, the deal we negotiated ensures that the district will not provide any additional subsidies to development of RFK campus, including tax abatements, tax exemptions, and other types of public subsidies. As you can see, at every step of this process, we have centered the needs and voices of our city's residents. Since the committee circulated its draft print yesterday at 11 a.m., we continue to engage the commanders to make this deal even stronger. So the DARES print today makes important changes. The print incorporates a 20% equity participation and 20% development participation of certified business enterprises requirement. It clarifies that no bonds may be issued or the proceeds of those bonds expended unless the development and financing agreement requirements have been met. It requires that the commanders construct the stadium using methods and materials consistent with the goal of obtaining LEED Platinum certification, among other things. It requires the District Department of Transportation to develop a traffic operations and parking plan with advisory neighborhood commissioners in Wards 7 and Ward 6. It clarifies the timelines for exemptions from the Anacostia waterfront environmental standards as well. Now, before I open the floor to my colleagues for additional comments, I really want to take this opportunity as Chair of the Committee on Business and Economic Development to thank the Council's Budget Office for all their hard work, all the hard work of our General Counsel's office, all the late hours that you all have put in. I want to thank the Office of the Chief Financial Officer's Office of Revenue Analysis. I want to thank Chairman Mendelson and his staff. I want to thank my colleagues and their staffs, because we've all been hard at work laboring to get this deal to the point it is today. And finally, I want to thank my staff, my committee director, Donnie Crawford, and all of the folks who are part of our team for their hard work and dedication to this bill. Without the help of the entire council, this deal would not have been possible. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I move the draft committee report in print with leave for staff to make technical, editorial, and conforming changes. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it unanimously of the members present and voting, and the measure is approved. This concludes the additional meeting of the Committee on Business.
Chairman, I'd just like to note the Committee of the Whole will follow, but probably in about 20 minutes. Okay, that was the last part of my statement, but thank you. Well, I wanted to steal your thunder.
I appreciate it, Chairman. I'm glad you're here with us. This concludes the additional meeting of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. The Committee of the Whole will follow in about 20 minutes. The time is now 1 p.m. exactly, and the Committee on Business and Economic Development, this hearing is adjourned.
All right, you heard Councilmember McDuffie just, in essence, really put it to pen to paper, as they say. The bill will now be voted. Yay or nay with regard to council members voting in favor and or against the bill. That's going to happen, as the council member stated, in just about 20 minutes. That's when the council, the DC Council, will meet as a whole and cast their votes. What you just witnessed there, in essence, was the pomp and circumstance, if you will, as they prepare to cast a vote on that bill. When that happens, in yet again, now about 19 minutes, we'll bring that to you live right here on the Live Zone. In the meantime, we'll take you back to the other big story of the day. In this case, it all surrounds the NTSB mid-air collision that took place back in January. This is now day 3 with the hearing still underway. Let's take a look in.
I would like to get the non-military operator's perspective of using ForeFlight in the National Capital Region for traffic monitoring.
Thank you for the question. I was struck earlier by significant differences in the way that we operate, and I think that hopefully has been a consistent theme this week. We use ForeFlight. However, our aircraft, all of our member aircraft, whether that's medevac or law enforcement, are equipped with multifunction displays that receive traffic information organically. However, we also display ForeFlight all the time on a knee board. In the case of my company, it's required to be mounted there. We also fly NVGs. We also do not stow our iPad or electronic flight bag at any time during the route structure here. We display the map, and I believe I heard, and I'm open to being corrected, but I believe I heard at one point Mr. Van Vetchen say that he might hand his iPad back to the crew chief during instrument flight profiles. And that struck me. If I'm reading that in error or listen to that in error, then that is my mistake. We're a single pilot instrument flight rules program, meaning one pilot, me, possibly, I think the general asked me the other day, if I'm carrying a patient, I might very well be flying an instrument approach into our hospitals with the med crew in the back. So truly just me. And we display, for people who don't know what ForeFlight is, it has several pages on it, and the primary one is a map page. When you fly instrument flight rules, you are required to also have available what are called approach plates, and it's a graphical depiction of your approach course. Well, that is able to be superimposed on the map itself, and on that map, just like in a car, using a car GPS system, you're able to display your own ship, your position with a blue dot. So I'm unsure how I would ever be able to complete an instrument flight without having my iPad on my leg. We don't turn them off during NVG operations. We may dim the screen slightly. We adjust them. But in today's NVG world, with the quality of NVG, there's no necessity to turn off or cover or stow an iPad, particularly in the DC route structure. I'm also unsure how you would be able to know where you are on a route when you're required to fly it as depicted when you don't have the map up, which we have a variety of level of maps we can display. We can display VFR sectional maps, IFR maps, high altitude, low altitude. Of course, helicopter pilots would never display the high altitude map. And then we can superimpose the helicopter route chart. The last thing I'd like to say is what I heard was that a Sentry antenna, which I have personal experience with, and what that, for everyone to know, is a very small antenna, battery-powered or plugged-in device, which can be mounted in the aircraft, and then using a Bluetooth connection to that very same iPad can display traffic. So I'm uncertain how you would say we can use the electronic flight bag for situation awareness, but turn it off or put it away. And further, if you have these Sentry antennas available, my company does not allow us to use Sentry or any other external antenna. The reason is we organically display that on our multifunction display. We receive ADSB in. We spent a lot of time talking about, I did earlier in the week, talking about ADSB out, but what now we're talking about is ADSB in, where the pilots are given all of the tools and all of the resources to glance down and confirm aircraft locations. I can do this, and I want to assure everyone, I am a flawed person. I am not the best pilot in the world by any stretch. I make my own fair share of mistakes. But I can fly single pilot on goggles in DC with my ForeFlight up, looking at traffic, glancing down to confirm what I'm being told by our air traffic controllers. So I don't understand. I came from a dual pilot world as well. I don't understand how that's not possible, or possibly the word I heard this morning was prohibited for two pilots not to be able to confirm traffic in such a dense airspace as this. And I appreciate the opportunity to say that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dressler, for bringing that perspective to our panel here, to our attention. I guess maybe the follow-up question then would be to Mr. Van Vechten about the prohibited comment, prohibited use of the iPad and ForeFlight in flight. Could you just kind of explain the Army's policy on that?
Sure. AR 95-1 and our airworthiness release prohibits the pilot on controls from referencing the iPad.
And is that in all flight situations?
Yes. And the way that I can accomplish an instrument approach is with a paper approach plate. We can brief it and then put it away. I have never had the batteries die on a piece of paper, but iPads can break. They do malfunction. The batteries die. And I don't know what kind of goggles he uses, but I have never not flown NVGs and had it glare off the windshield. I would love to get a pair of those goggles.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's the end of my line of questioning. Certainly, ma'am.
Mr. Van Vechten, you said pilot on controls.
Correct.
That does not mean, could you talk about the other crew?
Sure.
I thought at one point you said you could pass it back to the crew chief.
Yes, that is correct.
Maybe clarify that a little.
Yes,
because you're not single pilot.
No.
Yep.
No, typically, we are a pilot, co-pilot, and a crew chief. When we are on instrument flights specifically, the crew chief doesn't have much going on besides airspace surveillance, especially if we're IMC or instrument meteorological conditions in the cloud. They're literally looking inside a ping pong ball. So we pass them the iPad so that they can have situational awareness of where we are relative to different airports, and if we have a stratus with ADSB and information, where other aircraft are as well.
Crew resource management, maybe.
Crew coordination is what we call it.
Crew
Yes, ma'am.
coordination. And for this, the crew chief, you had stated earlier that the crew chief, in this case, the position of crew chief, not the specific crew chief, is to do surveillance.
Correct. That is our primary purpose. And as far as knowing the Gila routes without a map, we do what's called a local area orientation, where we show the pilots where the routes are using distinctive landmarks and features. There's predominant roads. There's a few monuments in D.C. that are easy to see from a distance that you can easily navigate from. So at any given time, with or without an iPad, I know exactly where I am within the D.C. airspace.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Madam Chairwoman, that concludes the technical panel's questions.
Wonderful. All right. We're moving on to the party questions. I'll start in the middle. Sikorsky.
No questions, ma'am.
Okay. Airline Pilots Association.
Thank you, ma'am. Can we please pull up 2 Air Gulf, page 60? And this is going to be primarily for Haskin and Mr. Suki. The MIT study shows that if ACAS XR had been installed on the helicopter, the collision chance would have been reduced by more than 50%. When did the FAA first begin its implementation of ACAS X?
If by implementation you mean certification of, so we released the technical standard order allowing the certification of ACAS XA devices in 2020, but we have not yet certified any ACAS XA devices.
Thank you. And how long have you been aware of ACAS and its potential?
We started ACAS X design, the concept 2009, formal standards 2013 for ACAS XA.
So can you just briefly describe why it's taken such a long time?
Yeah. So the standards are developed within an industry, aviation standards organization, RTCA. It's comprised of stakeholders such as vendors and airline, alphabet groups like your, ALPA, and all of that requires resources for all
That's
these.
good. So basically, it's a lot of people that need to talk together to figure it out, and a lot of certification processes
Correct.
and such. Okay, thank you.
The other thing I would just add is a lot of validation and verification has to go into this, and this was actually fast compared to the upgrade to TCAS 7.1, which was a very simple change. So.
Thank you for the clarification. For all my following questions, they'll be in relation to operations below 1,000 feet, specifically in the flight regime where RAs are inhibited. Can we please pull up Exhibit 2 Air Alpha, Figure 17? All right, perfect. So previously PSA was asked a handful of these following questions. However, we just like clarification with what the FAA guidance is. So what does the FAA expect a pilot to do in response to a traffic advisory?
I'm the program office. I'm not flight standards, and so, I mean, I could only point to the.
Are you familiar with the document?
Yeah, so I would just point to that.
Okay. So what the advisory circular states is do not deviate from assigned clearance for a TA only. Attempt to visually acquire the traffic. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Does that guidance take into account that RAs are inhibited below 1,000 feet?
I can't speak for who drafted it.
So you're unaware?
I'm not part of flight standards.
Okay. How long would you all expect a pilot to attempt to visually acquire traffic before deviating from a clearance during an active TCAS TA? Do you know?
I don't have input on that. That's pilot see no void.
Okay. So in this advisory circular and this guidance that the FAA does pass down, things like nighttime versus daytime are not explicitly taken into account. The workload of an air carrier crew below 1,000 feet is not stated whether or not it's taken into account. The visibility restrictions of an aircraft are also not considered or stated whether or not they're taken into account. So if this guidance doesn't take any of these factors into account, is there any chance that you or the others within your organization that are not here and present will revisit this and potentially issue something that will cover this flight regime where there is no guidance?
So I can say I think at the very end of the AC is a form that anybody can use to suggest updates to that guidance, but certainly we'll talk with our flight standards colleagues and suggest further update. But these documents can certainly be updated.
Absolutely, but a voice such as yours brings a lot more weight. Would you agree?
Not necessarily, but I mean, we certainly take advice from your organization and others. So.
Well, we're glad to hear of it. And this is I believe this is going to be for Mr. Haskin. Are the resolutionary advisories inhibition thresholds the same as for ACAS XA?
The resolution advisory inhibition thresholds are the same between TCAS-2 and ACAS-XA. Yeah, I think that's the question, yes.
Thank you. So even with ACAS-X resolutionary advisories, it would be inhibited if that was installed currently based on the current parameters. Yes. So in the end, now and in the future, pilots will be flying right now in a critical phase of flight without any protection, specifically in that phase of flight, or at least a very degraded state, lack of awareness, or collision protection.
All right, yet again, you've been listening to the NTSB hearing on the DCA mid-air collision. One of two breaking news stories we have been following throughout the day. The other, will it or won't it happen? I'm referring to RFK, the vote yay or nay in the commanders coming back to Washington, D.C. That vote due to happen any minute now. Typically in Washington, D.C., 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the most important building in the nation's capital. Not the case. 1350 Pennsylvania Avenue, the John Wilson building where we find our very own Bob Barnard, who is actually attending the council meeting. Bob, I know we are just minutes away from the council actually sitting down, convening, if you will, and casting a vote. We saw Council Member McDuffie earlier, in essence, putting pen to paper, the pomp and circumstance. What do you expect to happen to unfold within the next several minutes?
Well, I'll tell you what, Guy, it's looking more and more like this thing is going to pass. It only needs 8 votes. There are 12 members of the council right now because Trayon White just got reelected. And when this has its second reading in September, they'll need 9 of the 13, but they just need 8 of the 12 council members today, this afternoon, to vote in favor of this RFK campus redevelopment plan. What you saw earlier was Kenya McDuffie leading the Committee on Business and Economic Development, which kind of presented this bill. It passed through the committee, and now is going to go to the Committee of the Whole. So all of the DC council members who are in town, a couple we believe are going to join via Zoom who are out of town. But that vote, which will be the first of 2 votes to put this thing forward and pave the way for the commanders to come back to DC, should be happening shortly. No more testimony that was earlier this week, Wednesday and Thursday, and now, or Tuesday and Wednesday, and now today, the council, the full DC council, is going to vote on this plan, and it looks like, because of a late development today, it looks like it's going to go forward. And there were some council members who wanted to make sure that DC workers were involved in the construction of, and then going forward, working to build and then staff the stadium for events and its construction prior to that, obviously, and then also the hotels that'll be constructed and eventually opened in the area. There were a couple of council members who were on the fence about whether to greenlight this thing, but they today announced that they got an agreement from the commanders to work with labor unions and employ at least 51% of DC residents on the project to build and then staff it going forward, this new redevelopment, which, at least for the commanders, if the ground is broken next year, would be ready to go by 2030.
Yeah, Bob, we can see the council members beginning to take their seats right behind you. We'll pose one more question and then let you go. To your point, we know that Council Member Zach Parker released a statement with regard to exactly what you just made mention of, the labor agreement. We know that the meeting was due to start at around 12 noon or so. Typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but typically when a process like this is occurring, there are last-minute deals that are being made, and perhaps that's what was occurring, and that's why it is somewhat delayed.
That's right. Zachary Parker and Janice Lewis George, the Ward 4 council member, put out a statement together saying that this labor deal had been made. The Committee on Business and Economic Development, was supposed to start at 11. It was 90 minutes late. This Committee of the Whole was supposed to start at noon, and it looks like it's about an hour and a half late itself. So we're just getting ready to go here, guys. So
all right.
Well, I know Bob, you'll be streaming this, correct?
Oh, that is correct. Bob will let you get back to the work at hand. Yet again, amazing reporting, and folks, you're getting an inside look, literally, with regard to the D.C. Council as they take their seats and get ready to cast their vote, which will decide as to whether or not the commanders will return back to the nation's capital. Our very own Bob Barnard sitting in the council room. Bob, we truly appreciate you. We'll let you get back. Folks,
right,
I'm not sure if you saw, but there happened to be a clock as we still continue to stream Bob right there. You see that clock, it stated 5 minutes. So once the countdown begins, we'll make sure we'll get that to you as well and take you back to the Wilson building, where yet again the council in just minutes will vote as to whether or not they will bring the commanders back to Washington, D.C. We're going to take you back to the NTSB DC mid-air collision hearing, yet again currently underway. This is day 3 of the hearing as they initially started, Wednesday, I believe, and we'll wrap up sometime later this afternoon. It has been riveting testimony throughout the past 3 days, and emotional at that. Family members of those who lost their lives, somewhat emotional as new released video was shown, and testimony continues. We'll take a look at that and then take you back to the D.C. Council once that gets underway.
Mr. Rice, real quick question for you on your PowerPoint you had up there and your simulation of it, and it seemed to me like the aircraft was coming right towards each other in that the whole time. Can you explain the relative bearing of that and how that worked in I'm using the word simulation there because it looked like it was straight on, but as you can see when we watched the video, our aircraft was in a turn to the left, right? And the helicopter came and we know it impacted the CRJ on the right-hand side of the fuselage.
So I can only point to the fact that the data we received from the NTSB, that's what it showed, and that's how it played through the model that we created.
I'm sorry, I'm out of time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify, I think possibly the name was introduced differently. Is it Mr. Suki? Suki or Suchi?
Suki, thank you.
Suki, thank you. Does anyone have questions for Mr. Dressler? Okay, I know the team wanted to recall him for one question. Mr. Dressler, you're excused. You can have lunch. To the U.S. Army.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Fascinating discussion on the future and where we're going with ADSB and as an Army aviator and commercial aviator.
All right, it is officially D time. In this case, decision time. The D.C. Council now convening as they cast a vote whether or not to bring the commanders back to Washington, D.C. Let's take a look in.
1st, 2025. The time is 1:22 in the afternoon, and we are meeting in room 500, the council chambers of the Johnny Wilson building. This meeting is being televised on Council Channel Cable Television 13. It's also available on the council's website, www.dccouncil.gov. This meeting is following a meeting of the Committee on Business and Economic Development, and this meeting will be followed by an additional legislative meeting of the council. We have one item of business for this meeting, and that is consideration of Bill 26-288. Before we get there, we have to first determine whether we have a quorum. I believe there are several members who are participating virtually. Mr. Cash, would you call the roll?
Chairman Mendelson.
Present.
Councilmember Allen.
Here.
Councilmember Bonds.
Here.
Councilmember Felder.
Here.
Councilmember Fruman.
Present.
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Lewis George.
Here.
Councilmember McDuffie.
Here.
Councilmember Nadeau.
Here.
Councilmember Parker.
Here.
Councilmember Pinto.
Present.
Councilmember White.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. As I said, we have one item for consideration. It's Bill 26-288, entitled the Robert F. Kennedy Campus Redevelopment Act of 2025. This bill was sequentially referred first to the Committee on Business and Economic Development, chaired by Councilmember McDuffie, and then here to the Committee of the Whole. As our process to when a bill's jointly referred, the committee that is referring it first or has reported it out first, please make some presentation, and then I will make more presentation, unless you want me to make all the presentation.
Are you asking me a question?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today marks a proud and hopeful moment for our city. After months of public engagement, thoughtful negotiation, and hard work, the Committee on Business and Economic Development has unanimously approved the deal to bring the Washington Commanders back home to Washington, D.C., to the RFK Stadium site where they belong. This legislation before us is the result of countless hours of deliberation, listening to district residents, and engaging in meaningful conversations about what this site should represent. In late April of this year, the mayor unveiled a term sheet outlining a deal with the Washington Commanders that would serve as the catalyst for redeveloping the RFK Stadium site. As I mentioned earlier, there are areas where this deal fell short of what DC residents and DC-based small businesses deserved. But since that time, over the course of the last several weeks, I've worked along with the chairman and my other colleagues on the council to negotiate a better deal for DC residents, one that delivers additional revenue, a robust community benefits agreement, more jobs, and stronger labor protections for our DC workers. The feedback we heard directly from residents across the city has been positive. The one consistent theme that has resonated across the community is that residents want the Washington Commanders back in Washington, D.C., and back to their winning ways. As I've said earlier, I've said this from the very beginning, this is about more than simply building a football stadium. It's about really supporting people and building community. And I think that's where we've arrived with the deal that is before us today. And so I'm excited about the bill that we have before us, all the hard work, late hours, negotiations that have gone into providing much better agreements for District of Columbia residents, for District of Columbia workers, and for District of Columbia small businesses. And so I would ask that everybody support this bill that is before us today, and I want to thank all of my council colleagues, my team for their tireless efforts throughout this process. This has truly been what I characterize as a collaborative undertaking, and I'm grateful for each of you. Without the partnership and the commitment, this would not be possible today. So with that, back to you, Chairman Mendelson.
Thank you, Councilmember McDuffie. So we circulated the materials for today's meeting yesterday, but we have what I call a dais print that we circulated a little while ago. The dais print is identical to the print that the Committee on Business and Economic Development approved. The differences between what we circulated yesterday and the print before us is that there is incorporated provision regarding 20% equity participation and 20% development participation of certified business enterprises. Clarifies that no bonds may be issued or the proceeds of those bonds expended unless the development and financing agreement requirements have been met. I think earlier the version yesterday simply said that no money could be spent as opposed to the proceeds from the bonds. It requires that the commanders construct the stadium using methods and materials consistent with the goal of obtaining version 5 LEED Platinum certification, among other things. It requires that the District Department of Transportation develop a traffic operations and parking plan develop it in consultation with the ANCs in Ward 6 and 7 and with the developer. And it clarifies the timelines for exemptions from the Anacostia waterfront environmental standards. Those are the changes from what I'm moving and what was circulated yesterday. And before I go further and before I forget, I move the print for approval by the committee. And when this legislation was first presented to the council, the provisions were that there would be a subsidy of $500 million for the construction of the stadium, that in addition there would be subsidies or funding for the construction of 2 garages for a total cost of $356 million. And I will say, because there has been concern expressed about this, whether there would be any cost overruns, the legislation makes clear, I think this is a bit of a change from the legislation as introduced, but it's not a change from the term sheet, that any overruns are the responsibility of the team and not the city. So our maximum upside, as folks would say, is $856 million in these subsidies. And the council included in its budget approval earlier this week the funding of these amounts to the extent that the funding is in either FY26 or in the capital improvement plan, the CIP, for the 6-year CIP. And the debt service is covered as well. When this was presented to the council, the deal also included there would be a number of additional benefits for the team, which included roughly, I'm going to say roughly $1.5 million in taxes that either would go to the stadium or would be abated, and then some additional benefits such as parking revenues. As Councilor McDuffie noted, unless there's objection, I will continue. And if there is objection, I'll still continue. As was announced last week, the team had agreed to a number of changes, what I would characterize as improvements for the deal with regard to the district government or the district taxpayer. So there will be revenue sharing of parking revenues. Parking revenues from non-stadium event days will go to the city. And that's estimated over 30 years to be about $260 million, although I will note that the team's estimates are about $430 million, so it's higher, and we'll see. In addition, changes are that parking taxes will be imposed and go to the city, and that most sales taxes will also come to the general fund. That would be sales taxes on general merchandise, on food and beverages. All of this totals about $674 million over 30 years, or if you use the team's estimates, about $744 million. In addition, what we have with the legislation is not just a reference to Community Benefits Fund, which was in the term sheet, but actually $50 million that's referenced in the legislation that the team has offered. In addition, and this is not with the team, but this is in the legislation that we've adopted with the budget, that we've restructured the debt financing, which will actually save taxpayers about $55 million. And this is in the legislation, that there will be about $600 million that will be set aside over 30 years for a transportation improvement fund. And I think this is a big deal, even though this is not coming from the team. This is in what is before us. There has been concern about transportation, what the impacts will be of fans who are coming to the stadium or customers coming for events, but also whether there will need to be improvements to Metro Rail, possibly Metro Bus. We don't know how much that will cost. Expanding the capacity of the stadium, Armory Stadium, will surely cost millions, tens of millions of dollars. And if another rail station is necessary to be built, that will probably cost over $100 million. So we're setting aside, creating this fund, Transportation Improvement Fund, and setting aside a revenue stream which will total $600 million. As I said, I think that's a big deal. The council's budget office did an economic impact analysis that concluded that the stadium project will accelerate the mixed-use development at the RFK campus by possibly 11 years. That in addition, and this was part of the proposal originally, that the project will create approximately 6,000 housing units, of which 1,800 will be affordable. And of the 1,800, and these numbers are estimates, but half will be at 30% or below AMI, and half will be at 60% or below AMI. So that's affordable and deeply affordable housing that is part of this package. The tax revenue to the city is over 30 years is estimated from the stadium as well as redevelopment of the entire campus at about $26.6 billion. Since I announced changes that the team had agreed to last week, the team sent the council a letter, and I'm just going to highlight a few of the points in here. The club will be responsible for all cost overruns for the stadium and parking lots. And the club is also responsible for all stadium maintenance costs in excess of the stadium maintenance fund. And the maintenance fund is being funded by if I remember correctly, ticket tax revenues. The club will plan construction and development of the stadium and mixed-use environment in a manner that allows the fields at RFK campus to remain open. The club will work with the district to evaluate the siting of parking facilities, the parking garages, and the club will pause the construction of the third parking garage after the initial garages are constructed to evaluate the need for that third parking garage facility. I think this has been noted before. The club will build and operate the stadium to LEED O+M Platinum standard and commits to that standard. And I do think that's a big deal listening to the testimony at the hearing, because this is the ongoing operations of the stadium and that it be sustainable, environmentally friendly. The club will work with development partners in the district to provide justice-involved individuals with meaningful job readiness and employment training programs. That's only some of what was in the club's letter. The legislation that's before us also is different from the bill as originally introduced. And I should note that the bill as originally introduced was a subtitle in the Budget Support Act. We pulled that out so that we have Bill 26-288. We did have a hearing on the Budget Support Act on June 18th, so that was the first opportunity for the public to testify with regard to what's before us today. And then, as I think everyone knows, we had 2 days of hearings this week on the 28th and 29th, the 29th and 30th, where we had over 500 individuals who registered to testify. So those opportunities for public comment as well. Changes since the bill was first introduced as part of the Budget Support Act include structuring that the next step in this process after the council approval is that there will be a development financing agreement, DFA. That DFA will be submitted to the council for review, but we will not be able to amend it. But there are a number of conditions that have to be included in that DFA. And that is the way some of these abatements or changes to the abatements are being handled. As I noted, the district will be receiving parking revenue from non-stadium event days. The commanders will be locating their sales office and senior leadership offices in the district. There is a development milestone chart with rent acceleration as a penalty if development of the mixed-use parcels is delayed. And that's an important provision that a number of people testified to. What if the development never occurs? Well, I'm confident it will occur, but we do have this milestone chart in the legislation with rent acceleration as a penalty, and that rent will be substantial. I'd mentioned before the 20% equity participation and 20% development participation of CBEs, and also sets a 40% floor with a goal of 50% of the adjusted budget for the project in the development financing agreement. There is a preference in the legislation for CBEs in wards 7 and 8, and wards 5 and 6 are added to that. It's a 10% preference. The legislation clarifies that the proceeds from bonds cannot be expended unless the development and financing agreement requirements have been met. The commanders will construct the stadium using methods and materials consistent with the goal of obtaining a LEED Platinum certification. And I already mentioned about the operation at a LEED Platinum status. A Department of Transportation traffic operations and parking plan. There is also in the legislation a waiver with regard to heritage trees. However, there would still be a fee that would have to be paid, which will be substantial. And the legislation sets up a community benefits and community reinvestment fund, as well as a community benefits oversight committee. I already mentioned the Transportation Improvement Fund, and there's a stadium maintenance fund for the maintenance, repair, and capital improvements, which is funded from excess stadium revenue funds, and any costs above that are borne by the commanders. I think that's a fair description of the legislation before us. As I said, I'm moving the Deus, what I'm calling the Deus print, the print that was circulated if I said this morning, I might be wrong. It might be shortly after noon. So moved. Is there discussion? I'm happy if there's no construction, no discussion.
I have amendments. Should we move forward?
You are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to offer several amendments in hopes to make more sense for the District of Columbia. So I want to move Amendment 1, which would strike the tax exemption for personal seat licenses, or PSLs. For the question I'm asking myself is why should luxury seat fees get a tax break while everyday families pay full price here in the city? This amendment ends a special deal that benefits big spenders at the expense of the public. Teams charge over $200,000 in order for a fan to purchase a ticket to the game. We are not taxing that while the city is in a financial deficit. We have schools, roads, and public services that need funding, and we're in a deficit. So I'm suggesting that we not give up tax dollars just so someone can buy better stadium seats and keep public money where it needs to be. If the commanders want to offer premium seating, that's fine. Plenty of stadiums do that. Some of them tax it, but they should pay their fair share just like the rest of us. This amendment sends a clear message. Stadium deals should work for the people, not just for VIPs and private interests. The stadium deal should not come with hidden giveaways. This amendment sets the right tone for our partnership with the commanders and for future development, fair, responsible, and community-minded. So again, this is simply going to tax personal seat licenses like we tax everything else in this city. I now move Amendment 1.
The amendment is before us. I'm going to ask that members not support this. There's been quite a bit of discussion about this. I think they're called PSLs. I'll note two things. One is that in discussions with the team over the last month, we talked about the different types of abatements and taxes and revenues. And in the end, what we did was we extracted $674 million. That's our estimate, $744 million, the team's estimate, in revenue, whether it was taxes or parking revenues. The choice was parking and sales, and it was not the personal seat licenses That's just what the choice was. So this amendment overlooks that. But I would add, most stadiums do not tax the personal seat licenses. And my understanding is that of the very few that do, those tax revenues go into construction. They do not go to the city. That there are two reasons why the PSLs are not being taxed. There are two reasons, as I've just noted. The PSL is all about funding construction, and that's why they're handled or treated the way they are in with other stadiums. Again, I would ask members not to support this. Is there any other discussion? Councilmember Parker?
I have a question. It's my understanding if we were hypothetically to tax these seat licenses, it would go towards construction. Obviously, the district is providing resources, subsidies for construction. I guess for Councilmember White, or maybe Chairman, you could weigh in here. Hypothetically speaking, if this were to pass, how then do we reconfigure the district's investment for construction? Or is this suggesting that we should add these taxes on top of the district's already proposed subsidies? Does that make sense, what I'm asking? Councilmember White or Mr. Chairman?
I'm happy to respond.
Councilmember White?
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. So yes, to your point, the city is putting in money for construction. So this could be seen as a way that we recoup our investment. As it stands right now, we, over 30 years, are going to bring in about 600 some odd $million, but we're putting in over $1 billion. So this would reduce the loss of revenue on the district, and specifically the money we're putting in for construction. This can help us repay that.
Mr. White, did you say 600 million?
The number has changed many times, so whatever your number is, Chairman, we can go with that.
Well, I'm looking at the TAF. It's about 10% of that.
No, you suggested that the city is now bringing in a certain number of millions of dollars because of the changes the council made?
Yes, that number was 674 million.
There we go.
By our calculation, 744 million.
Okay,
by the
so
team.
whether it's 674 or 744, we're putting in 1.1 billion. So we're taking a loss because of construction. And I'm just not seeing why the city would take a financial loss and excuse a tax. So I don't want to take up Councilmember Parker's time because I will take a second round.
Anything further on this? Then second round, Councilmember White.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to remind us again that the city is in a financial deficit of about $1 billion over the next 3 years. We're going to put over $1 billion into this, and over 30 years, we're going to get $700 million back. That is lopsided, and so I'm suggesting that nobody, no resident, no other business gets to come into the city and treat taxes like an a la carte menu and say, we'll take this one, but we won't take that one. That's what we're doing here. So I'm just saying we should be consistent. We're not going to limit the team on how much they can charge for the personal seat licenses, but we would tax that like we tax everything else to cover the needs. When we don't do that, I will remind us we'll be in the budget next year talking about either what residents we're going to raise taxes on or what programs for residents we're going to cut. So instead of doing that to our residents, let's just tax things the way that we normally tax things.
If there's no further discussion, we have the amendment before us.
And that's for a roll call vote, Chairman.
Mr. Cash, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Lewis George.
No.
Councilmember Lewis George votes no. Councilmember McDuffie.
No.
Councilmember McDuffie votes no. Chairman Mendelson.
No.
Chairman Mendelson votes no. Councilmember Nadeau.
Yes.
Councilmember Nadeau votes yes. Councilmember Parker.
No.
Councilmember Parker votes no. Councilmember Pinto.
No.
Councilmember Pinto votes no. Councilmember White.
Yes.
Councilmember White votes yes. Councilmember Allen.
Yes.
Councilmember Allen votes yes. Councilmember Bonds.
No.
Councilmember Bonds votes no. Councilmember Felder.
No.
Councilmember Felder votes no. Councilmember Fruman.
No.
Councilmember Fruman votes no. Councilmember Henderson.
No.
Councilmember Henderson votes no. Mr. Chairman, there are 3 yeses and 9 nos.
Hey, Howard.
The amendment fails. Councilmember White?
I'm leading.
Thank you.
I'm going to text you our plan.
Councilmember Fruman, you're not on mute.
I'll just talk with my brother.
Could have been worse.
Councilmember White, I think you had 4 amendments. Number 2?
Thank you, Chairman. Amendment number 2 would create a revenue sharing agreement between the team and the district. It would require that the district receive 10% of all gross sales receipts from Commander's events. The question I ask myself is, why should the city commit to funding over 26% of the development of the site while not receiving any portion of the true revenue? If the team profits, I believe the district should profit as well. The Commanders are using public land and public money. It's only fair that the public gets something back in return. This amendment helps bring real dollars back to our neighborhoods, money that can support schools, parks, transit, and public safety. A billion-dollar franchise shouldn't get a fair ride while the district residents are not. If they're doing business here, they should contribute directly to the community that is supporting them. This revenue sharing plan turns stadium hype into lasting impact, making sure that DC benefits every time the Commanders fill those seats. Taxes are a cost to the consumer. Revenue sharing is a cost to the team. At this time, I move amendment number 2.
Thank you, Councilmember White. I'm going to ask that members not support this. I'm going to start with a question which I hope gets a brief answer. Mr. White, did you discuss with the team this proposal or discuss with them the economics behind their construction of the stadium?
No, Chairman. We were supposed to get a contact from the team yesterday. We didn't. And as you and the rest of the members know, we are moving at lightning speed on this.
Okay, well, I asked that because you did say in your remarks a moment ago that the city should get something back in return, which is sort of overlooking that, well, we're getting all the benefit of the economic development on the private parcels. We're getting tax revenue off of the stadium as well as the mixed-use parcels that we are getting over 30 years. What did I say at the beginning? $26.6 billion. So the city will be getting $26.6 billion. So to say we should be getting something back in return as if we're not getting anything, I think is a very unfair statement. In addition, you noted that 26% of the development is being funded by the district. That would be the $500 million plus the $386 million. And my recollection is when looking at the comparative analysis in the Robert Bob report, that 26% was either low or it was like it was kind of it was not at the high end in terms of public subsidies. It was at the low end of public subsidies. So I totally get that it sounds appealing to say, well, there should be revenue sharing, but there is revenue sharing, and the district's contribution is not extraordinary. Again, I would ask members to not support this. Is there further on the amendment?
Chairman Mendelson.
Councilmember Fruman.
Thank you very much. Folks might eventually be puzzled because I'm going to be voting against these amendments, and then I'm also going to vote against the bill as a whole. There have been a ton of conversations with the commanders about the economics of this deal. And for example, going back to the PSL, I mean, they pushed hard on the idea that that was not the place that they agreed to provide revenue, and they did it in other places. And the CFO said about the PSL that they will be charging a market clearing price, which means any tax on it would ultimately come out of the balance of the revenue that they would get from the deal as a whole. Mr. Chairman, you talked about all the different benefits that we can get from this deal. And a big one is the mixed use development. And the thing that becomes a snag for me is the accountability for delivering that mixed use development. But I will talk about that later. I think there is a supermajority on the council to support this bill. And I don't want to be a part of any kind of poison pill in contravention to the will of the supermajority of the council. But while I'm not voting for these amendments, I'm also not satisfied with this deal.
Is there anything further on this amendment?
Chairman.
Second round.
Thank you, Chairman. This is one of the biggest subsidies for a sports complex in U.S. history. And while you are correct, Chairman, to talk about taxes that the city will receive on the back end, those are taxes from the users. We are helping to construct the stadium, and the stadium is going to bring in profit to the team. We are a partner in building the stadium, and I believe that we should be a partner, and I'm only suggesting 10% in the revenue as well. I think that's basic fairness to taxpayers. I certainly don't think the team or any other business would settle for less than that, and I think we've got to hold ourselves to a certain standard as well for the sake of our residents and for our finances. So I would ask members to support this.
The vote will be on the amendment number 2. All those in favor of the
I can have a roll call, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cash, would you call the roll?
Councilor McDuffie.
No.
Councilor McDuffie votes no. Chairman Mendelson.
No.
Chairman Mendelson votes no. Councilmember Nadeau. Councilmember Nadeau.
Yes.
Councilmember Nadeau votes yes. Councilmember Parker.
No.
Councilmember Parker votes no. Councilmember Pinto.
No.
Councilmember Pinto votes no. Councilmember White.
Yes.
Councilmember White votes yes. Councilmember Allen.
No.
Councilmember Allen votes no. Councilmember Bonds.
No.
Councilmember Bonds votes no. Councilmember Felder.
No.
Councilmember Felder votes no. Councilmember Fruman.
No.
Councilmember Fruman votes no. Councilmember Henderson.
No.
Councilmember Henderson votes no. Councilmember Lewis George.
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis George votes yes. Mr. Chairman, there are 9 noes and 3 yeses.
Thank you, Mr. Cash. The amendment fails. Councilmember White, did you have a third amendment?
Yes, Chairman. Sorry, pulling that up. Chairman, Amendment 3 would implement stronger penalties if the team fails to deliver on their development commitments. The stadium is not the only thing that is to be developed here, and the city has some high needs. It would require the team to pay $2 million annually.
All right, guys, you talk about sitting on pins and needles. So 2 amendments put forth by Councilmember Robert White. Both of those amendments have now been struck down. The councilmember now presenting a 3rd amendment. Following that, we assume that the city council as a whole will cast a vote as to whether or not to bring the stadium, or shall I say the Commanders, back to Washington, D.C. You're taking a look now on the right-hand side of your screen at some of the YouTube comments that you folks are leaving. In this case, Tyrell Dunn says, hey, let's get the deal done. Council members, bring the team home. You can continue to comment throughout the afternoon on our YouTube page. Speaking of that, you see the QR code right there. If you're streaming on the Fox Local app, we thank you so much for doing so. If you're not, click on that QR code right there so you can continue to do just that. YouTube folks, thank you as well. You will be redirected once we reset, coming up in just a couple of seconds. We encourage you to continue watching. On behalf of Emmy, I'm Guy Lambert. This is the Fox 5 Live Zone.